Today, you'll discover the story of Sarah Mitchell, a pregnant widow who faced nature's fury while building her own cabin, until a lonely rancher offered her the family he had lost. Get ready for an emotional narrative full of unexpected turns. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening to this story from. The October wind howled through the Montana mountains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of an early winter. Sarah Mitchell, 7 months pregnant, hammered another nail into the wooden frame of what would become her cabin. Her hands, once soft from years of office work in Denver, were now calloused and bleeding, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. "Just a few more boards," she whispered to her unborn child, feeling a kick in response. "We're almost done with this wall, little one." The storm clouds gathered overhead, darker than any she'd seen since arriving in this remote corner of Montana 3 weeks ago. Sarah had purchased the land with the last of her husband Tom's. Life insurance money, 20 acres of wilderness, far from the memories that haunted their old home, far from the intersection where a drunk driver had stolen her future in mere seconds. Thunder rumbled across the valley as Sarah struggled to lift another beam. Her back screamed in protest, and she had to pause, breathing heavily. The nearest town was 40 miles away, and her only neighbor, if you could call someone living 5 miles away a neighbor, was a rancher named Jake Morrison, whom she'd seen only once when she'd first arrived. He'd offered help then, but she'd refused, determined to build this new life with her own hands. "I don't need anyone," she'd told him, perhaps more harshly than intended. The memory of his weathered face, marked by what looked like his own deep sorrows, flickered through her mind as the first drops of rain began to fall. Sarah looked at the half-built structure, just a foundation and 3 incomplete walls. The tarp she'd stretched over her supplies whipped violently in the wind. Her small tent, where she'd been sleeping, wouldn't survive what was coming. Panic rose in her throat as she realized the severity of her situation. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the vast emptiness around her. In that brief, brilliant moment, Sarah saw how truly alone she was. No cell service, no vehicle. She'd sold it to buy building supplies, planning to get a truck after the cabin was finished. Just her unborn child, and the merciless storm. The rain turned from drops to sheets, soaking through her jacket within seconds. Sarah scrambled to secure her tools, but the wind was too strong. Her hammer flew from her hands, disappearing into the darkness. That's when she heard it, the crack of wood splitting. The eastern wall, the one she'd spent 3 days building, began to lean dangerously. "No, no, no!" She rushed toward it, but her foot caught on a piece of lumber. She fell hard, instinctively turning to protect her belly. Pain shot through her shoulder as she hit the muddy ground. The wall crashed down moments later, missing her by mere feet. Lying in the mud, rain pelting her face, Sarah finally allowed the tears to come. They mixed with the rain, invisible in the storm. For the first time since Tom's death, she admitted the truth to herself. She couldn't do this alone, but she'd pushed away everyone who'd tried to help, convinced that accepting assistance meant accepting that Tom was really gone. Through the chaos of wind and rain, she heard something else, the sound of a horse's hooves growing closer. Jake Morrison had been watching the storm build from his ranch house, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. At 62, he'd seen plenty of Montana storms, but this one made him uneasy. His thoughts kept drifting to the young widow building alone on the Henderson property. Stubborn as a mule, that one, but he recognized the look in her eyes, the same hollow determination he'd seen in his own mirror for the past 5 years. When the lightning started, he couldn't sit still anymore. "Damn fool woman," he muttered, though there was no anger in it. He saddled Duke, his most reliable horse, and headed out into the storm. The photograph on his mantel, his wife Emma and daughter Katie, both lost in a car accident, seemed to watch him go. And the ride to Sarah's property was treacherous. Duke picked his way carefully through the mud and rushing water, trusting Jake's guidance. When they crested the final hill, Jake's heart sank. Even through the rain, he could see the devastation, the collapsed wall, scattered supplies, and there, a figure lying in the mud. "Ma'am!" He dismounted before Duke had fully stopped, rushing to Sarah's side. She was conscious but shivering violently, her shoulder at an odd angle. "We need to get you warm." Sarah looked up at him, rain streaming down her face. "Oh, I'm fine," she said automatically, then winced as she tried to sit up. "I just need to—" "What you need is to get out of this storm before you and that baby catch pneumonia," Jake interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Can you ride?" Pride warred with survival instinct in Sarah's eyes. Another crack of lightning made the decision for her. She nodded. Jake helped her onto Duke, then swung up behind her, keeping one arm securely around her to prevent her from falling. Sarah leaned back against him, too exhausted to maintain her walls. The ride to Jake's ranch house seemed endless, Duke struggling against the wind. When they finally reached the house, Jake half-carried Sarah inside. The warmth hit her, like a physical force, making her realize just how cold she'd been. Jake guided her to a chair by the fireplace, then disappeared, returning with towels and dry clothes. "These were my daughters," he said quietly, setting them on the table. "Bathrooms down the hall. I'll make some tea." Sarah wanted to protest, to say she couldn't accept his help, but her teeth were chattering too hard to speak. She managed to change, her shoulder screaming with every movement. Katie's clothes fit reasonably well, though they accommodated her pregnant belly with difficulty. When she emerged, Jake had hot tea waiting and was heating soup on the stove. The house was simple but well-maintained, with the peculiar emptiness of a place that had once held more people. Sarah noticed the photographs on the mantel, a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a young woman who looked like Jake, all bright smiles and joy. "Your family?" she asked softly. Jake's hands stilled for a moment. "Were," he said simply. 5 years ago. Drunk driver." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She sank into the chair, teacup trembling in her hands. "My husband, too, 4 months ago." They sat in silence for a moment, two souls recognizing a shared wound. Finally, Jake spoke again. "That shoulder needs looking at. I've got some veterinary training. Had to, living out here. Will you let me?" This time, Sarah nodded without hesitation. As Jake gently examined her shoulder, dislocated, not broken, she found herself talking about Tom, about the baby, about her desperate plan to build a new life where memories couldn't find her. "Running doesn't work," Jake said quietly, easing her shoulder back into place with practiced hands. Sarah gasped at the pain, then felt immediate relief. "Believe me, I tried. The memories just pack themselves up and follow along." "Then what does work?" Sarah asked, accepting the sling he fashioned for her arm. Jake was quiet for a long moment, ladling soup into bowls. "Haven't figured that out yet, but I know trying to do everything alone just makes the emptiness bigger." He set a bowl in front of her. "Eat. You're too thin for someone carrying a baby." As Sarah ate the first hot meal she'd had in days, she studied Jake's face. The lines around his eyes spoke of laughter as much as sorrow, and his hands, though rough, moved with surprising gentleness. This wasn't the gruff, dismissive rancher she'd imagined when she'd first refused his help. "I can't go back." "Out there tonight," she admitted finally. "Wouldn't let you if you tried," Jake replied. "Guest rooms made up. Been ready for 5 years, waiting for Katie to visit." His voice caught slightly. "Never got used." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside Jake's house, something shifted. 2 broken people, brought together by tragedy and weather. It began to see that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to face their pain alone. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Sarah woke in the guest room. Katie's room, she realized, seeing the horse show ribbons on the walls and books on the shelves. Her shoulder ached, but it was manageable. What wasn't manageable was the thought of facing her destroyed building site. She found Jake in the kitchen, already dressed and making breakfast. "Morning," he said without turning around. "How's the shoulder?" "Better, thank you." Sarah hesitated in the doorway. "I should go check on my property." "Already did." Jake set a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. "Went out at first light. Your tent's gone, probably in the next county by now. Most of your lumber's salvageable, but you lost some." "Supplies." He poured coffee, his movements efficient. "Eat first, then we'll talk." Sarah wanted to argue, but the smell of food made her stomach growl loudly. The baby kicked, as if in agreement. As she ate, Jake sat across from her, his own coffee untouched. "I've got a proposition," he said finally. "That land you bought, it's good land, but it's too exposed. Wrong place for a cabin, especially with winter coming." He met her eyes. "I've got a spot on my property, near the eastern border, protected by hills." "Close to water? You could build there." "I can't," Sarah began. "Let me finish." Jake's voice was firm but kind. "I'm not offering charity. This place is too big for one person. Has been for 5 years. You'd be doing me a favor, having someone else around, and that baby's going to need more than just walls and a roof. Going to need community." Sarah felt tears threatening. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." Jake was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything and try to rebuild alone. And because my Emma would have boxed my ears for letting a pregnant woman camp in a tent with winter coming. And because—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Because this house has been a tomb for 5 years. Maybe it's time to let some life back in." Before Sarah could respond, they heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Jake frowned, moving to the window. "That's Bill Stevens' truck, and looks like he brought half the town with him." Sarah joined him at the window, seeing a convoy of pickup trucks pulling into the yard. Men and women emerged, carrying tools and lumber. Bill Stevens, whom Sarah recognized as the hardware store owner from town, approached the house. Jake opened the door. "Bill, what's all this?" "Heard about what happened last night," Bill said, tipping his hat to Sarah. "Mrs. Mitchell." "Ma'am, storm took out the Hendersons' old barn, too, and Mary Patterson's chicken coop. Figured while we're all rebuilding, might as well help each other out." He grinned. "That's what neighbors do." Sarah felt overwhelmed. "But I was rude to you all. I said I didn't need help." Mary Patterson, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, stepped forward. "Honey, we've all been where you are, one way or another. Pride's a luxury none of us can afford out here." She patted Sarah's arm gently. "Besides, can't have a baby born without a proper home. Goes against everything we stand for." Over the next hours, Sarah watched in amazement as the community she'd pushed away rallied around her. Jake led the discussion about the new building site, and everyone agreed it was a better location. They organized work crews, scheduled supply runs, and began planning a cabin that would be finished before the first snow. "I can't pay you all," Sarah said, feeling she had to make the offer. "Don't recall anyone asking for payment," Bill replied. "Though if you're looking to contribute, Mary could use help with her accounts. Heard you were an accountant." "We're back in Denver." As the day progressed, Sarah found herself swept into the rhythm of community work. Despite her injured shoulder, she helped where she could, organizing supplies, making sandwiches with Mary, discussing the cabin layout with Jake. The baby seemed more active than usual, responding to all the voices and activity. Late, in the afternoon, as the work wound down for the day, Sarah found herself alone with Jake on the porch. The framework of her new cabin was already taking shape in the distance, protected by the hills, just as he'd promised. "And I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. Jake shook his head. "No thanks needed, though if you're offering, I could use help with the ranch accounts. Emma always handled those, and I've made a mess of them since." Sarah smiled. The first real smile she'd managed since Tom's death. "And I think I could manage that." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The cabin would be built. The baby would have a home. And maybe, oh just maybe, she'd found something she hadn't even known she was looking for, a place to belong. Jake seemed to read her thoughts. "Emma used to say that home isn't just walls and a roof. It's the people who help you build it." He paused, then added quietly, "Welcome home, Sarah." That night, as Sarah settled back into Katie's room, she placed a hand on her belly. "Did you hear that, little one? We're home." The baby kicked in response, and for the first time since losing Tom, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. 3 weeks passed in a blur of construction and unexpected friendship. Sarah had moved her few salvage belongings into Jake's house, taking over not just the ranch accounts, but also bringing an energy the place hadn't seen in years. Every morning, she'd make breakfast while Jake tended the horses, and they'd plan the day's work on the cabin over coffee. The community's help hadn't wavered. The cabin walls were up, the roof was on, and they were working on the interior. Sarah had tried to return to her own property to salvage what she could, but Jake had quietly taken care of it, bringing her belongings to the ranch without fanfare. One evening, as November settled over the mountains with its first dusting of snow, Sarah sat at Jake's kitchen table, reconciling the ranch books. She frowned at the numbers. "Jake, you haven't been charging full price for your horses. You're practically giving them away." Jake shrugged from where he was fixing. "A bridle. Times are tough for everyone." "Not that tough." Sarah showed him the figures. "You could be making 3 times this amount. You're running a business, not a charity." "Emma used to say the same thing," Jake said quietly, his hands stilling on the leather. Sarah had learned to navigate these moments when the past crept into their conversations. "Tell me about her die," she said gently. Jake set down the bridle, moving to pour himself coffee. "She was everything. Came out here from Boston, of all places. Her father bought the neighboring ranch, and she'd ride over to our property line every day. Took me 6 months to work up the courage to talk to her." A smile played at his lips. "She laughed at my stammering and asked if I was going to invite her for dinner or if she had to invite herself." Sarah smiled, picturing it. "And Katie, born 2 years later, spitting image of her mother but with my stubbornness. She was going to veterinary school, wanted to come back and help with the ranch." His voice grew thick. "They were driving back from her college. Orientation when—" Sarah reached across the table, covering his weathered hand with hers. "I'm sorry." Jake turned his hand over, squeezing hers gently. "Some days are harder than others, but lately—" He looked at her, something vulnerable in his eyes. "Lately, it's been easier to breathe." Before Sarah could respond, she gasped, her free hand going to her belly. "Oh," Jake was on his feet instantly. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "No, Sarah laughed, tears in her eyes. "Give me your hand." She placed his palm on her belly, and after a moment, the baby kicked strongly. "She's been active all day." Jake's eyes widened as he felt the movement. "I found out last week at my checkup. A girl." Sarah watched Jake's face, saw the mix of joy and pain there. "I've been thinking about names. I'd like to call her Emma, if that's okay." Jake pulled his hand back as if burned, turning away. Sarah's heart sank. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "No." Jake's voice was rough. He turned back, tears streaming down his weathered face. Emma she would have loved that. She would have loved you. They stood there in the kitchen, two wounded souls finding healing in each other's company. Jake pulled Sarah into a careful hug, mindful of her growing belly. "Thank you," he whispered. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A car Sarah didn't recognize pulled up to the house. She was alone. Jake had gone to town for supplies. When she opened the door, her heart nearly stopped. Tom's parents stood on the porch, their faces a mix of determination and disapproval. "Sarah," Tom's mother, Linda, said coolly, "we've been looking for you." "How did you find me?" Sarah's hand went protectively to her belly. "Credit. In card records," Tom's father, Robert Nace, replied. "You can't just disappear with our grandchild." Sarah felt the old panic rising. They'd never approved of her, had blamed her for Tom's death, if she hadn't asked him to go to the store that night, if she'd gone herself. What do you want?" she managed. "What's best for the baby?" Linda said, looking around with obvious distaste. "They're living in the middle of nowhere, with some stranger. Tom would be horrified." "Tom is dead," Sarah said, finding strength she didn't know she had. "And I'm doing the best I can." "Are you?" Robert's voice was sharp. "We've consulted lawyers. An unmarried woman, living with a man she's not related to, in inadequate housing." "Now hold on." Jake's voice came from behind them. Sarah hadn't heard his truck return. He stepped onto the porch, his presence solid and reassuring. "I don't believe we've met. Jake Morrison." He didn't extend his hand. Tom's parents looked him over dismissively. "This doesn't concern you, boo," Robert said. "Anything concerning Sarah concerns me," Jake replied evenly. "And you're on my property, so I'd appreciate a more respectful tone." Linda turned back to Sarah. "We're prepared to offer you a substantial sum to come. Back to Denver. We'll set you up in a proper home, ensure the baby has everything she needs." "In exchange for what?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "For doing what's right. Tom's child should be raised by family." "I am her family," Sarah said firmly, "and this is our home." The standoff might have continued, but Mary Patterson's truck pulled up, followed by Bill Stevens. Word traveled fast in a small community, and Sarah's new neighbors had apparently decided she needed backup. "Everything all right here, Sarah?" Bill asked, sizing up the situation. "Just fine," Jake answered. "A Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell were just leaving." Tom's parents looked around at the gathering crowd of ranchers and townspeople, all clearly ready to support Sarah. Linda made one last attempt. "This isn't over. That baby deserves better than this. That baby deserves love," Mary Patterson said firmly, "and she's got plenty of that right here." After Tom's parents left, Sarah sank onto the porch steps, shaking. Jake sat beside her, and their neighbors gathered around. "They'll be back," Sarah said quietly. "They have money, lawyers." "And you have us," Jake replied. "All of us." Bill nodded. "Let them try to argue that a whole community isn't good enough to raise a child." As the group dispersed, Jake and Sarah remained on the porch. "I'm sorry," she said. "I've brought trouble to your door." "No," Jake said firmly. "You've brought life back to this place, and I'll be damned if anyone's going to take that away." December arrived with a vengeance, blanketing the Montana mountains in deep snow. Sarah's cabin was nearly complete, insulated and warm, with a beautiful stone fireplace Jake had insisted on building himself. But she hadn't moved in yet. Somehow, without either of them directly addressing it, she'd remained at the main house. On a particularly cold evening, Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner when she felt the first contraction. She gripped the counter, breathing through it, False labor, she told herself. She wasn't due for 2 more weeks. But when the second one came, stronger than the first, she knew. "Jake," she called, trying to keep her voice calm. He appeared in the doorway immediately, took one look at her face, and understood. How far apart? 10 minutes, maybe less. Another contraction hit, and she doubled over. "Oh, this is faster than I expected." Jake was all ready, moving, grabbing coats and keys. Hospital's an hour away in good weather, in this snow. "We won't make it," Sarah gasped as another contraction rolled through her. "They're coming too fast." Jake helped her to the living room, his movements calm despite the concern in his eyes. Mary Patterson was a midwife before she retired. "I'll call her." But the phone lines were down. The snow had taken them out that morning. Jake made a quick decision. "I'm going to ride to Mary's. It's faster than the truck in this snow. Will you be okay for 20 minutes? Sarah nodded, though fear clawed at her throat. "Go. Hurry." The next 20 minutes were the longest of Sarah's life. The contractions came in waves, each stronger than the last. She tried to remember the breathing exercises from the one birthing class she'd attended before Tom died. But panic kept interfering. What if something went wrong? What if the baby came before help arrived? Then she heard it. Horses. Not one, but several. Jake burst through the door with Mary Patterson, followed by Bill Stevens and his wife Janet, who was a nurse. Half the town seemed to have mobilized. "Well now," Mary said, immediately taking charge, "let's see where we're at." Her experienced hands were gentle but efficient. "You're doing beautifully, honey. This little one's just eager to meet everyone." The next hours blurred together. Sarah was aware of Jake beside her, letting her crush his hand during contractions, of Mary's calm instructions, of Janet monitoring the baby's heartbeat. The storm raged outside, but inside, the house was warm and filled with purposeful activity. "I can't do this," Sarah gasped after a particularly intense contraction. "Yes, you can," Jake said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know. You built a cabin. You stood up to those lawyers. You can do this." "Tom should be here," she sobbed. "I know," Jake said softly, "but you're not alone. We're all here. Emma's here." As if in response to her name, the baby decided. It was time. With Mary's guidance and Jake's steady presence, Sarah brought her daughter into the world just as the clock struck midnight. The baby's cry was strong and immediate, filling the house with new life. "She's perfect," Mary announced, placing the baby on Sarah's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Sarah looked down at her daughter through tears of joy and exhaustion. The baby had a shock of dark hair and Tom's nose, but her eyes, when she opened them briefly, were all Sarah. "Emma Grace," Sarah whispered. "Ah, welcome to the world, little one." Jake's hand trembled as he touched the baby's tiny fist. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma would have been so honored." Over the next days, the house became a hub of activity. The community that had helped build Sarah's cabin now helped welcome baby Emma. Meals appeared as if by magic, supplies were delivered despite the snow, and there was always someone stopping by to check on them. On Emma's 5th day of life, as Sarah sat nursing her by the fire, Jake cleared his throat nervously. "I've been thinking," he began, then stopped. "That's dangerous," Sarah teased gently. Their relationship had shifted since Emma's birth, deeper and more intimate, though neither had put words to it. "I want to show you something." Jake retrieved a wooden box from his study, setting it on the coffee table. Inside were legal documents. "I've been talking to my lawyer about the ranch, about the future." Sarah's heart began to race. "Jake." "Let me finish," he said, taking a deep breath. "I know we've both lost people we loved. And I know it's only been months for you, years for me. But Sarah, you and Emma, you've brought this place back to life, brought me back to life." He met her eyes. I'd like to make it official. Not marriage, not unless and until you're ready, but legal protection, adding you to the deed, making sure you and Emma are protected if anything happens to me, making sure those grandparents of hers understand that you have a whole community standing behind you." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Jake said simply. "This is your home, both of you, for as long as you want it." Baby Emma chose that moment to finish nursing and look up at them both with wide, curious eyes. Sarah saw their future stretching out before them, not the one she'd planned with Tom, but something different, something that had grown from tragedy but bloomed into hope. "Yes," she said softly, "yes, to all of it." As the wind howled outside or inside the ranch house, a new family was forming, not bound by blood or traditional ties, but by choice, by community, by the understanding that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Jake reached over, his calloused hand gentle as he touched Emma's cheek. Welcome home, little one," he whispered. "Welcome home." The fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light over the three of them. A pregnant widow who'd found strength she didn't know she had, a lonely rancher who'd learned to open his heart again, and a baby named for love and memory who would grow up surrounded by both. See, outside, the Montana mountains stood eternal and protective, guardians of this unlikely family who had found each other in the storm and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts.